Nós teremos agora a participação de uma celebridade do mundo da segurança. O inventor do Zero Trust, hoje Field CTO da Palo Alto, Mr. John Kindervag. John vai abordar o tema Zero Trust, mitigando os riscos de amanhã, hoje. Com a palavra, John Kindervag. Welcome, John. Good presentation for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate your time. So today, I'm going to be talking about Zero Trust. I think I heard that the great thing is that Zero Trust is the same in all languages. So I don't speak any Portuguese, unfortunately, so I'm going to have to do this in English, but Zero Trust is Zero Trust all the way around the world. So I'm John Kindervag, like he said. I'm the field CTO for Palo Alto Networks. I live in Dallas, Texas, and I'm the person who created Zero Trust. So that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. Is Zero Trust, why it is the strategic approach to stopping data breaches. And so I started this journey about 12 years ago when I was at Forrester Research. And when I first got to Forrester Research, I was asked to look at what is the future of cybersecurity, what is wrong. And I realized there was no idea around strategy in cybersecurity. So I wanted to add strategic engagement ideas around cybersecurity. And in order to do that, first we have to define what strategic engagement is. And so there are generally 4 levels of strategic engagement, and they look like this. The first level is grand strategy. This is the ultimate goal that any entity is trying to achieve. And in order to understand the grand strategic ideas in our organization, we have to know who the grand strategic actors are. And those are typically your CEO, your board of directors, the president of your company. In a nation state, it's your president, your prime minister, those kinds of people. So we need to define a grand strategy, and then we can add strategy. Strategy is the big idea that we're going to use to achieve that ultimate goal, that grand strategy. And then we have tactics. Tactics are the things we use, the stuff. Most of us are very tactical. You know, if you're like me, you got into cybersecurity because you like computers and you found you could make a living playing with computers. How great is that, right? But one of my mentors 25 or so years ago taught me that almost everyone in the world confuses strategy and tactics. And this is certainly true in the world of cybersecurity. So we need to start thinking strategically, then we can implement it tactically. And then we have to have a 4th level, that's called operations. Operations are the way we use the things we have in order to execute on the big idea so that we can achieve that ultimate goal. And if we want to be successful, all 4 of these things need to work together in concert. And if they don't, we will fail. So this maps perfectly to the cyber war that we're all in. And make no doubt about it, we are all in the same cyber war. We are all directly connected to the world's worst malicious actors. So we all fight the same cyber war. You may think that you're in Brazil and I'm in Texas, but we're directly connected. And because of Ethernet, the world is flat. So there are no suburbs on the internet. We all live in the same bad neighborhood. And so we need to define a strategic way to fight that cyber war. So therefore, we need to define a grand strategy first. And the grand strategy of cybersecurity is to stop data breaches. Now, I think we all understand that data fuels the modern economy, but it's this term breach that confuses us. We in cybersecurity say that a breach happens when somebody gets into our network and they start looking around. But that's not what a breach is. That's actually an intrusion. Someone has intruded upon our network. Now, a breach is when it has been redefined for us by legal and regulatory entities like, say, GDPR or CCPA in California, PCI for credit cards. And all those regulators, all those legal laws and legal people say that a breach happens when data that is sensitive or regulated has been exfiltrated from our networks or systems into the hands of a malicious actor. So a data breach is when something goes out of our environment, not when somebody comes in, when stuff goes out that shouldn't go out. And I'm going to talk to you in a minute why data breaches are the grand strategic objective. But this leads us to Zero Trust being the world's only cybersecurity strategy, because it's designed to stop data breaches. So it meets the grand strategic goal. And then we have tactics. Tactics are the tools and techniques. A lot of times I have people say to me, well, John, I don't really care about data breaches. In my job, all I care about is keeping the network up and running. And somehow I have to diplomatically say, yes, but you're a tactical actor, not a grand strategic actor. And we need to have a grand strategy, not just a set of tactics. And then we use those tactics in a certain way. That's called operations. That's where we have platforms and policies that work together to make all this stuff happen. Now, why do I say that grand strategy of cybersecurity is stopping data breaches? Well, it's one event that happened 7 years ago next week. It's called the Target data breach. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but over Black Friday weekend, that's the U.S. Thanksgiving weekend. So Thanksgiving is next week here in the U.S. In 2013, 110 million credit card records were stolen from Target. This is the most significant event in the history of cybersecurity. In fact, it's day zero. Cybersecurity, in my opinion, does not begin until this event happens. Everything prior to this is what I call BT, or before Target. We now live in the year 6AT, 6 after Target. We're going to celebrate the 7th birthday of cybersecurity next week. Yay! You guys should have birthday parties for your industry next week if you can, if you're not celebrating Thanksgiving. Because this was the first time in history that a CEO was fired because of something IT did or didn't do, which was allow a data breach. CEOs don't get fired over ransomware attacks. They don't get fired over DDoS attacks. They don't get fired over phishing attacks, but they do get fired over data breaches. And so the only thing that can get a CEO fired that you can do is allow a data breach. And if there is a data breach in your environment, you allowed it. Somewhere there were rules in place that allowed it to happen. It didn't just happen. You allowed it to happen. So this is why I say preventing data breaches is the grand strategy of cybersecurity moving forward. Now, this leads us to zero trust, a strategy, right? Because we used to think that certain things were strategic when they weren't. Things like defense in depth. At Forrester, we call that expense in depth. You spend money you don't have on things you don't need because you don't know what you're supposed to protect in the first place. If it was about buying stuff and spending money, you've bought enough stuff, you've spent enough money, but it didn't work because it wasn't strategic. It wasn't a system. And then we have compliance. This is all the checklist. And I go around the world and I discover, or I used to travel around the world all the time, and I would discover every country has their own data privacy laws and data breach laws, and they overlap and everything. But you guys in Brazil probably have customers or employees who are citizens of the EU or residents of the state of California. And so, what happens in Brazil, yeah, that's important. But what happens in Europe is, what happens in Brazil affects you from a European legal perspective or a California legal perspective. And so there's a lot of overlap, a lot of contradiction, and there's too much compliance. And then we have best of breed. This is all the things that are measured by Forrester Waves and Gartner Magic Quadrants. And I was well known at Forrester as the only analyst who refused to do a wave because I thought that cybersecurity had to be a system, not a collection of disparate, disconnected parts that didn't talk to each other. And so if you have that best of breed mentality, I'm going to buy the best one of these and the best one of those and the best one of that, all you're doing is creating more expense and depth. You're actually increasing the complexity of the system and thereby increasing the risk that you incur. So you think buying stuff is going to decrease your risk? It actually increases your risk if it doesn't talk together. And then finally, I say that most people just use hope as their risk mitigation strategy. This is my joke strategy. The H stands for put your head in the sand, pretend like there's nothing wrong at all. The O is obfuscate reality, pretend like it's not as bad as it is. Oh, that's probably a false positive. We've heard that many times, right? That's a false positive. We'll do a forensics investigation after the holiday season is over. And of course, a forensics investigation is an autopsy, and autopsies are always done on dead bodies. So by that time, it's too late. And then the P stands for point the finger at somebody else. We saw this at, say, Equifax, a big company in the U.S., does credit reports. And there was a massive data breach. 400 million credit reports were stolen. Almost all the credit reports in the world were stolen. And the CEO got in front of the United States Congress, our legislative branch, and testified that it was one guy's fault. Some guy refused to patch a system, and it's his fault. All one guy's fault. And we all know, because we've all been in the industry for a while, that if there's somebody whose job it is to patch systems, all they want to do is patch a system, right? But there's somebody up above them saying, don't patch that system, because what if it's a bad patch? Oh no, we could go down for an hour. And we know the cost of being down for an hour. What if it's $1 million? Let's pretend it's $1 million if you're down for an hour. Well, we can't have that happen, so don't patch. But here's the problem. With all risk metrics, we can't calculate the cost of not doing the right thing. We cannot calculate the cost of not patching that system. It was hundreds of millions of dollars, if not $1 billion, and it led to the CEO being fired, the employment journey. The CEO of Equifax got fired. The CEO of Target, the CEO of Sony got fired. CEOs get fired over data breaches. This is why all of these things that we always thought were our strategies are really just tactics. Now we'll get into zero trust, what it is. Zero trust comes out of thinking about this word trust. We talk about trusted and untrusted systems. Well, what is trust? It's a hard thing to define, but I can tell you at its core, it is a human emotion. And it is a human emotion that we have injected into digital systems for absolutely no reason. I can't tell you the first time we started talking about trusted versus untrusted systems, but I can go back to 1984. Ken Thompson, one of the co-creators of Unix, won the Turing Prize. And his Turing Prize speech was about the problem of trusting trust. So it turns out trust is the root problem that we have in IT, because trust is a vulnerability. And what do you do with vulnerabilities in your organization? I hope you mitigate them. And so you must mitigate this vulnerability called trust, because not only is it a dangerous vulnerability, it is also an exploit at the same time. It is the only vulnerability that is also an exploit. How crazy is that? You don't need to create new malware to exploit trust. All you have to do is be on the network. And as a former penetration tester, I can tell you they can always get on your network. There will never be a time in history where you will be able to keep all intruders out of your systems. That will never happen. So we need to eliminate trust so that we can make sure that the entities doing things on the network are doing the correct things, because trust is only valuable to the malicious actors in your networks right now who are going to exploit them. So get rid of trust. It is this broken trust model that is the fundamental problem. The idea that the untrusted network went to the evil internet where all bad things are, right? So evil out there in the internet. And then we have the trusted network, your internal users, your domain users. They're all good, wonderful people, aren't they? But here's the problem, guys. Bad things can come from that evil internet. We can get malware across this trust boundary, this fake trust boundary. And so what's malware? Malware is just a bunch of packets all clobbered together. Well, what's a packet? A packet is a collection of zeros and ones as represented by electrons or photons. So if I can get my little electron right here on this side of the diagram in your network, you're going to elevate my privileges and give me attributes of trust. That is insane. And then we have malicious insiders. There's two names that everybody knows no matter where I go in the world. I call them the Beyonce or the Madonna of cybersecurity. Snowden, Manning. They were trusted users on trusted devices. They had the right levels of patching, the right antivirus. They had true multi-factor authentication with a robust identity management. But nobody looked at their packets post-authentication. And that's why they were able to do all these bad things. This is why identity and multi-factor authentication are consumed within zero trust, but do not equal zero trust. So we have to eliminate trust. No more trusted users, no more trusted packets, no more trusted devices, no more trusted systems. Now, quite often people will say to me, John, you're saying people are not trustworthy. And I am not saying that. I'm saying something much more profound. I am saying people are not packets. No person has ever been on a network. It is the anthropomorphization of the network that is killing us. The idea that John is on the network. Well, I'm not on the network right now. I'm pretty sure I'm sitting in my house in Dallas, Texas. I have not been shrunken down into an atomic particle where I've been sent over the public internet to the Zoom server so I can appear on your desktop right now. That has not happened to me today. It has never happened to me, nor has it ever happened to you, nor has it happened to any human being ever. Even in the movies, it rarely happens. Tron, Lawnmower Man, but even in the Matrix, they got to plug in, right? So people are not packets. And once we understand that, now we can start eliminating that baggage that this old trust model brings and actually solving the real problems of cybersecurity. So Zero Trust is very simple. There's only 9 things that you need to take away today to really understand it and deploy it. The 4 design concepts I'm going to show you now, and then the 5 steps to deploying it that we'll talk about in a moment. So first, we focus on the business outcomes. What is the business trying to achieve? This is how we align to grand strategic ideas. Secondly, design the network from the inside out instead of the outside in. We start with the data or assets we're protecting and then move outwards. Third thing we do is we determine who or what needs to have access. Need to know, least privilege. Neither Snowden nor Manning needed to have access to almost any of the data they stole in order to get their job done. Think about that. We give too much access to too much data to too many people for absolutely no reason at all, just because we have a broken trust model. And then we need to inspect and log all the traffic all the way up to layer 7. And so that we can apply a layer 7 policy statement to the traffic. Ultimately, Zero Trust is a layer 7 policy statement. I just need layer 7 controls to enforce it. And we do this automatically in our PAN OS in policy. And that's why I came to the company. You know, when I ran out of runway at Forrester Research, I looked around at the 40 or so Zero Trust networks I'd worked on prior to that. And I realized that independently of me, my customers overwhelmingly chose Palo Alto Networks as the backbone of their Zero Trust environment. And so I was very, very lucky. My customers chose for me where my next job should be. Now, the best way I can show you visually how this looks from a metaphor perspective is to show you how the U.S. Secret Service protects the President of the United States. This is an image from President Barack Obama's 2009 inauguration parade. And there are 3 things that the Secret Service knows about the President of the United States that we do not know about the data or assets we are protecting. First, they know who the president is. They don't scan for the president. They don't do presidential discovery projects. Second, they know where the president is at all times. And then third, they know who should have access to the president at any given time. Now, you can see here that on this date, it was January of 2009. Yes, they had a perimeter. But notice something here. This uniformed Secret Service agent, he has his hands in his pockets. He has his hat on. Why? Because it's cold outside. And he knows he's not doing any real protection. He's just there as what we call security theater, to intimidate. No, the real protection is being done at the bottom of the screen at what I call the protect surface. The protect surface is the fundamental tactical concept of Zero Trust. What do I need to protect? So I can shrink down the attack surface orders of magnitude to something very small and easily known called a protect surface. If you understand the concept of protect surface, you're 90% of the way to understanding Zero Trust. So on this date, for example, there are 4 people in the protect surface: the president, his wife, and his 2 daughters. If at the end of the day, those 4 people are left alive, the Secret Service did their job. Now, the next thing that happens that we need to look at and realize how amazing it is the Secret Service moves their controls in adjacent to the protect surface. We don't do that in cybersecurity. Our controls are typically on the perimeter or on the endpoint, which are as far away from the protect surface as possible. This creates a secondary attack surface that the attackers use that we happen to call the internal network. So if you look at any data breach reports, you will see that the attackers were inside the network for days, weeks, months, even years before the data breach happened or was discovered. And in most cases, the breach is discovered by a third party, not the breached entity. So by having our controls in close to the protect surface, the Secret Service now can define a microperimeter in policy. So at the moment this photograph was taken, there are two individuals who can transit outbound of the microperimeter. These two Secret Service agents who are driving the vehicle. That's it, because of course everybody else in the vehicle is the protect surface, right? They are the protect surface. They happen to be in a vehicle, but the vehicle isn't the protect surface. The people are. Now, also, when we look at this, we can see that there are 0 people who can get inbound to that microperimeter. Look at this Secret Service agent at the bottom of the screen. He does not have his hands in his pockets, no gloves on. He does not have a hat on because he has a layer 7 control inside of his coat where he's going to enforce policy. And remember, policy is binary. Allow or deny. That's all you can do. Allow or deny. And he's going to deny access at this time. I can tell you that, having been around Secret Service protection details, there is a deny policy about anybody coming in at this moment. Now, the Secret Service doesn't stop there. They continuously monitor and update. So they can look out here and go, oh, this guy in white, he looks suspicious. We're going to send out a message to keep an eye out on him. Or they could get a message from somebody that says, hey, we need to change the access policy and allow somebody to come in, some very important person. And so they can do this kind of stuff in real time. This is a zero trust model of executive protection. This is how you should protect anything, whether it is the president of the United States or a data string or an asset that we have. This is also how the White House is protected. There is a zero trust environment in the White House it was built for President Obama. It's still in place for President Trump today. It uses Palo Alto Networks technology and my design methodology. And the CISO and I of the White House went to the Office of Communication of the White House to try to get a case study done. And that's where we found out that Zero Trust has something in common with a famous Hollywood movie called Fight Club. I don't know if you've seen Fight Club or not, but if you have, you know the first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. And unfortunately, often the first rule of Zero Trust is you don't talk about Zero Trust, because most companies who are deeply embedded in Zero Trust consider that to be very sensitive or proprietary information that they do not want attackers to have. Now we get into tactics. How do we build this? And this is where we get this 5-step methodology. So there's only 5 things that you need to know to actually build it, right? First thing we need to do is define our protect surface. What do we need to protect? And I've given you an easy to remember acronym called DAS. So you protect what we call a DAS element. And this stands for data that we need to protect, applications we need to protect, assets or services we need to protect, things like DNS or DHCP or Active Directory maybe. And so what we do is we take a single DAS element, put it into a single protect surface, and we build out our zero trust environment, one protect surface at a time, so that we can do this incrementally, iteratively, and non-disruptively. Now, the layer 7 technologies that Palo Alto Networks have give you visibility into what protect surfaces you have on your network right now. Secondly, we map the transaction flows. How does the system work together? And that layer 7 visibility shows that, so that we can actually protect something, because we have to know how the system works if we're going to protect something. And this will show us where to put the controls and how to architect the environment. That's step 3. And so, again, we have a lot of the main controls you will need, whether you're doing this on-premise or in a cloud, it doesn't matter. And then we have hundreds of technology partners where we can integrate with this in real time. And then the 4th step is to create a zero trust policy. We have the best policy management tools, and I'll go through this a little bit more in a moment. And then the 5th step, we monitor and maintain this environment so that all of the telemetry coming from our proactive preventative controls sends traffic to our big data lake so that we can do machine learning against it. And out of the insights we get from machine learning, we can update policy in real time through a couple of different mechanisms. Now, Zero Trust is the thing that you should use if you are doing network segmentation. So a lot of people have to do segmentation. Zero Trust will show you the right way to do it. So the only reason to segment a network is to protect something, and that's why you should always start with your protect surface. This is a cardholder data environment in this case. The data type is PCI, and so we need to protect that credit card string, and so that is the thing we're going to protect in this example. And so this tells us why we are segmenting. A lot of people segment because they have an audit finding that told them to segment, but they don't really know why they're segmenting, and they certainly don't know what they're protecting. The second thing we do is we connect a segmentation gateway to the protect surface to define a micro perimeter in policy. And so a segmentation gateway is a gateway that segments networks layers 2 through 7 based upon users, applications, or data. And this tells us how we're enforcing that segmentation up at layer 7. So this must be done at layer 7. You can't do it at layer 3. It's not possible. All attackers know how to bypass layer 3 controls. Now, our next generation firewall technology, whether it is physical or virtual, functions as segmentation gateways inside of Zero Trust environments. And once we have centralized management, now this is the reference architecture for Zero Trust. It's this simple, and we just do this over and over again for different protect surfaces so that we can build out Zero Trust incrementally. Now, this works in any environment. The first ones happened because we could replace stateful packet filtering firewalls with physical segmentation gateways. But then we had the rise of two different clouds. We have the private cloud, which we own, and we have the public cloud that somebody else owns. And they're the exact same thing. They're just a hypervisor stack. That's all they are, folks. There's nothing particularly interesting or sexy about them. They're just a hypervisor stack that you store stuff in, but you are responsible for everything that you put into each of those clouds. So the way in which we protect a hypervisor stack or a public or private cloud is we take advantage of the virtual network infrastructure, the layer 2 and 3 of every vSwitch port, to do a transparent service insertion of a virtual segmentation gateway. That's our VM series next generation firewall. So we can add vSwitch, we can add layer 7 segmentation gateway capability to every vSwitch port. This is important because we can apply policy right here as the traffic moves up towards the workload, where, of course, the protect surface is sitting. And we can put these segmentation gateways inside of containers now using Kubernetes, so that's pretty amazing. And all of these need to have centralized management based upon the identity of the users and the applications and the data. So now there'll be some other things we can do. We can add endpoint protection to the workload where that's appropriate. And this all works exactly the same way in every single public cloud. So a virtual segmentation gateway gets inserted. We add policy to that. That policy is automatically pulled with the workload. And now we can start doing some containerized segmentation gateways. We can continue and put workload endpoint protection where it's appropriate. And then we have specialized technology for the public cloud that can talk either as APIs or via agents to control configurations and to look at compliance, can do container security, serverless security, as well as machine-to-machine based micro-segmentation on the back end. So that's how you extend Zero Trust to the private clouds. So when it all comes together, it kind of looks like this. We start with the protect surface. This tells us where we want the micro perimeter to be. And so once we understand that, that will tell us, hey, here's where we need to put a segmentation gateway. It can be physical or virtual that you own, or it can be virtual that we own. We call that Prisma Access. It's our remote access or Zero Trust network access solution. It is also our Zero Trust as a service solution. So again, we continue to design towards the outside. That's where we get to the endpoints. We'll protect those endpoints with Cortex XDR Prevent, so that we protect them against malware and especially exploitation. That's much more important to protect against exploits than malware. There's an unlimited amount of malware, but there's only a limited number of exploits, as well as this provides telemetry back to the data lake. And then we have an agent called Global Protect where we can define and enforce access policy at the edge. And all of this has uniform policy management universally through Panorama, so that all of this telemetry now goes into the data lake. We can do machine learning against it and automatically update it with our orchestration tools. Now, we get into the operations, platforms and policies. And you can already tell that I'm a movie fan. I use a lot of movie references in my presentations because movies give us a way to visualize things in cybersecurity that otherwise would be a little bit hard to understand. I mean, let's face it, if you took a picture of cybersecurity, it's always just somebody looking at a computer. It's really, from a visual perspective, pretty boring. And movies try to make it really interesting. And so we can use those as ways to help people connect more emotionally with this business that we're in. And so there's a famous movie called The Imitation Game. And I don't know if you've seen it or not, but if you haven't, go watch it. I think it's on Netflix. It's about breaking the Nazi Enigma code. And Alan Turing, the father of modern computing, is building this analog computer called the Bomba. And at one point in the movie, he says something so profound. It just shook me to my core when I heard it. He said, "What if only a machine can defeat another machine?" And that is so true, right? We are fighting a machine. We aren't fighting human beings. We are fighting a machine. Do you realize that hackers don't have change control? They don't have to call Hacker Central and get a new hacking window if the hack that they were trying to do against you doesn't work. But if they are hacking you, you have to go through a tremendous number of manual processes before you're allowed to stop them from doing bad things to you. It's insane. So we have to build this machine to defeat the machine. We're doing that at Palo Alto Networks. And the way you interface with that machine is through policy. And I've created a way of doing that policy called the Kipling method. So the Kipling method, this is my personal homage to the writer Rudyard Kipling. He gave us the idea of who, what, when, where, why, and how in a poem in 1902. And so no matter where I go in the world, everybody understands who, what, when, where, why, and how. And so we can take that construct that everybody understands, and we can teach people how to write Layer 7 Zero Trust policy. So our user ID technology, which is a Layer 7 replacement for source IP address, becomes a who statement. We can answer the question, who should be allowed to access the resource? And we can add any authentication type, any MFA, any biometrics, X509 certificates, doesn't matter, to that user ID to validate that who statement. And then we can take our application ID, which is a Layer 7 replacement for port and protocol, to define a what statement. By what application should we be allowed, should that who be allowed to access a resource from? And we have over 3,300 predefined application IDs in our database, and we can create any custom IDs, app IDs, for any of your custom applications. Of course, we can do time-limited rules, and you should do a lot more time-limited rules. You should turn off rules that you won't be using in the middle of the night, right? There's some things that are going to be 24/7, but when we look at breach logs, we often see, here's where you went home for the evening, and here's the attackers come into work. Here's their first coffee break, and they're back. And they've taken their lunch break, second coffee break. They've gone home for the night, and you come to work, right? And during this whole time, before you leave, or after you leave, and before you come back in, that rule is still turned on. And so get rid of that rule. Turn it off when you're not going to be using it. And then we have device ID. That defines the where statement. Where is any asset located? IT, OT, IoT, IMOT, IIoT. It doesn't matter. It's all running on TCP/IP. And then we have content ID. That's the how statement. How should we allow that to happen? So we can look at the things that you used to buy as separate technologies. We deliver as cloud delivered services. That's called SASE by Gartner. Right? Gartner just looked at the way we've always done things and gave it a name. So, whatever. But we have IPS, we call that threat protection, or we have sandboxing, we call that wildfire. So we can we can use this methodology to write rules, whether we're going to a cloud. So this is a SaaS environment. We're going to go to Salesforce, one of those predefined app IDs, and you can get to Salesforce if you're in the sales user ID. So that's maybe the OUs from salespeople, sales managers, sales admins. Will add some kind of authentication type to it. Great. You can go there, but only if you meet the content ID. So we're going to turn on threat protection. We're going to decrypt the traffic. We're not going to need URL filtering because we don't have, we're not going to be surfing the internet. We'll turn on the sandboxing feature, Wildfire, to make sure that every attachment going to and from the Salesforce cloud is clean. We'll add some DLP probably. And if you can meet all of those criteria, then we'll allow it. Zero Trust is a set of allow statements. Very few deny statements that we ever have to write. And this is important because all bad things happen inside of an allow statement. If you're looking at traffic in your SIM that has been denied and then saying, we need to investigate this, you're wasting your time. If you deny something, great, you denied it. Focus on the stuff that you've allowed, because that's where the bad things all happen. If something bad happens, there is an allow rule that allowed it to happen. And this works on premise as well. This is, if you're in the healthcare industry, here's Epic, one of the electronic medical record solutions. We can do this anywhere. It doesn't matter. And I can teach anybody to do this. I've taught CFOs, CIOs, all kinds of people how to write zero trust policy using this construct. And not only can anybody write it, anybody can read it and understand it. And it's easy to audit. So auditors love this kind of thing. So if you have a lot of compliance initiatives, if you are creating this kind of policy, this will make your life in audit world much easier. And then we'll add multi-factor authentication and consume it within user ID. All the people who are saying that that Zero Trust is identity, hey, this is just one little part of what we do. It's not identity. They're not telling the truth to you. They're just spinning Zero Trust to meet the limitations of their own products. So where do you start? Well, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. So we look at the sensitivity or criticality of the protect surface over the time on the Zero Trust journey. And this creates what's called the Zero Trust learning curve, where we look at everything on a per protect surface basis. And of course, you'll remember that each protect surface contains a single DAS element. So the first protect surfaces that we focus on are called learning protect surfaces. Early on, we focus on things that are not very important. So if we make a mistake, no big deal, who cares? And then we'll focus on some stuff that's a little bit more important so that we can practice doing it. You get to Zero Trust the same way you get to Carnegie Hall. Practice, practice, practice. And once you've done that, then you're going to focus on the crown jewels, the keys to the kingdom. I used to tell people, start with the crown jewels. I don't believe that anymore because it's too risky to start there until you've learned and practiced and have confidence. But luckily, this happens very early on in your Zero Trust journey if you do it in the right way. And then after that, we'll focus on things that are less important. And eventually, you in your organization gets to define a threshold and say, everything below this level of sensitivity isn't important enough to do Zero Trust. So those are the key things that I want you to take away from today. This is Zero Trust in a nutshell. It's a lot of information, I know that, but I'm trying to give you a way to just take a few things out of it, understand it from end to end, so that you can then ask the right questions and we can help you in your Zero Trust journey. So it's really been an honor to be in front of you. I wish I could be there in Brazil. I was telling my friends in the pre-call, I live in Dallas. This whole area is kind of, we call it northern Brazil, kind of, because there's so many Brazilians and a ton of your famous bull riders live up in big ranches around here by me. So that's the one thing we have in common, Texas and Brazil, bull riding. So anyway, thank you for your time. You guys are the heroes of coronavirus. By enabling everybody to work from home and doing all this kind of stuff. So give yourself a pat on the back and know that what you are doing every single day is important and making the world a little bit safer.
Great presentation, John. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We don't have time for questions, but you're now part of our Brazilian security community. Strong hug for you.
Thank you.